Again, good morning, and I am Linda McGee. I'm the Chief Judge of the North Carolina Court of Appeals. I am truly honored to have the opportunity to be part of this special celebration today. We are pleased to be able to celebrate the service, accomplishments, and dedication of 7 women who have served or are currently serving on our Supreme Court. I call upon Chief Justice the Honorable Mark Martin to please come forward to extend his special words of welcome to you.
Good morning. It's my honor to welcome all of you to your Supreme Court. As you may know, the judicial branch is in the midst of a 3-year period of commemorative celebrations leading up to the 200th anniversary of our Supreme Court in 2019. This court has a long and proud history, and it's important that we take time to reflect on and celebrate that history, and to celebrate all of the court's distinguished members, both past and present. And we have put in your program agenda this morning a listing of every individual who has served as a member of this court, all of the Associate Justices and all of the Chief Justices. But today, we want to give special honor and recognition to the women justices who have served on this court. Thanks to all of you for coming out to recognize these justices and their illustrious public service to our state. There are many distinguished guests in attendance, and I've been asked to recognize the current justices who are not part of the program today and their spouses. First, my wife, Kim Martin. Also joining us today are Senior Associate Justice Paul Newby, Associate Justice Sam Irvin IV, and Associate Justice Mike Morgan and his wife, Audrey. Every member who has served on this court is important and highly valued. Today, we recognize the superb contributions that this court's women justices have made and continue to make to our state's jurisprudence and to the rule of law. Women justices constituted a majority of justices on the court from 2011 to 2014 and currently hold 3 seats on the court. Their wisdom and insight have benefited this court and all North Carolinians. Between them, our honorees boast over 70 years of service on this court. I am honored to have served alongside 5 of our honorees today: Chief Justice Sarah Parker, Justice Patricia Timmons-Goodson, Justice Robyn Hudson, Justice Barbara Jackson, and Justice Cheri Beasley. And even though I was too young to serve with Chief Justice Rhoda Billings, I am honored to be her longtime friend. I'll now turn the floor back over to another accomplished jurist, our Master of Ceremonies, Chief Judge Linda McGee.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chief Justice Martin. You and all the members of the Supreme Court always make us feel particularly welcome for special sessions of your court in this stately courtroom. Thank you also for giving me this special opportunity to be able to honor the women that I have admired and had the pleasure of working with over the years. As you can see from the number of people in this courtroom, and in the Court of Appeals courtroom, and in the history room, and other viewing areas within this building, that we have an impressive crowd in attendance today to honor our women justices. I would like to recognize members of our court family and dignitaries who are with us today. With this large crowd, it could be easy for me to inadvertently overlook someone, and please excuse me in advance if that happens. We are pleased to welcome Associate Justice Franklin Freeman, Associate Justice and current United States Court of Appeals 4th Circuit Judge Jim Wynn, and Associate Justice Willis Wichard. We also welcome Judge Marion Warren, Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts, Judge John Smith, former AOC Director, Christy Roeder, former clerk of the Supreme Court. Louise Stafford, former Supreme Court librarian, and her husband Emmett Stafford. And Lisa Shepard, Executive Director of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. From the Court of Appeals, I am especially honored to welcome Judge Wanda Bryant, Judge Anne-Marie Calabria, Judge Rick Elmore, Judge Donna Stroud, Judge Mark Davis, Judge Lucy Inman, Judge Hunter Murphy, and Judge John Arrowwood. We also welcome Carolyn Dubé, the Executive Director of the Judicial Standards Commission. From our state Superior Court bench, we are pleased to have Judge Patrice Hennett. From our state District Court bench, we are also pleased to have the following current and former judges with us: Judge Lori Christian and Judge Lillian Jordan. From the Office of Administrative Hearings, we welcome Chief Judge Julian Mann. From the Executive Branch, we're also pleased to have with us Secretary of Revenue Ronald Penny. In addition, we welcome Dean Martin Brinkley, University of North Carolina School of Law. Dean Phyllis Craig Taylor, North Carolina Central University School of Law. Karen McNeil, President of the North Carolina Bar Association. John Silverstein, President of the North Carolina State Bar. And Sheriff Earl Butler, former Sheriff of Cumberland County. We are delighted to have all of you with us today. But most important to this occasion are our outstanding honorees and the members of their proud families who are here with us today to celebrate this special event with those they love and care about, and to whom we extend our most special welcome. Welcome to you all. Our first honoree is here today with us in spirit. Chief Justice Susie Sharp served on the Supreme Court from 1962 until 1979, first as an Associate Justice and then as Chief Justice. She will be memorialized today by Associate Justice Franklin Freeman.
Chief Judge McGee, Mr. Chief Justice, distinguished members of the North Carolina Supreme Court, who are sitting where I think we all ought to take note of, the only time probably in the history of this court we'll see it sitting on this side of the bench rather than on the other side. Distinguished honorees, ladies and gentlemen, if I drag a little, I got in from Spain last night at 9 o'clock, 3 weeks with my youngest daughter, my wife and I. So I may be a little road weary. Chief Justice Susie Sharp, with whom I worked for 4 years as her administrative assistant in the role of Assistant Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts and Assistant to the Chief Justice, was born in 1907 in Rocky Mount, soon moved to Reidsville. Her father and mother had 10 children, of which she was the oldest. During the first 16 years of her life, she underwent 2 at least traumatic experiences that helped mold her and give her strength for many of the difficulties ahead as the first female judge in the state of North Carolina and the first female Associate Justice and Chief Justice. When she was about 8 years old, her brother next to her named for her father, James, died of a brain tumor at the age of 6. He had wanted to be a lawyer like his daddy. He used to talk about wanting to be my dad's stenog. When he died, Judge Sharp was 9. She said, "Daddy, I'll be your stenog." And from that point on, focused on becoming a lawyer. When she was 15, her 2 twin brothers, born in 1921, got milk fever from poisoned milk when they were about 18 to 20 months old. And in short order, the 2 of them died within 3 weeks of each other. Their mother was so overcome with grief that Chief Justice Sharp, at the age of 16, had to take over the running of the family. And for the next year or 2, she was the mother to the remaining 6 children. My mother was a contemporary of Judge Sharp in Reidsville. Most of you know I'm from Dobson, but my mother grew up in Reidsville, attended the same church as Judge Sharp. Mama was a year younger than Judge Sharp, but she used to talk about seeing Judge Sharp in the early 20s bring all of the remaining children into church every Sunday in a nice, neat little row, all dressed, ready to go. Those 2 experiences taught her how to cope with so many difficulties in life. And as we all know, any of you that know anything about Judge Sharp, she had a terrible personal situation to deal with in the 80s when her sister and a number of her family were horrifically murdered. It was my sad duty to inform her of both episodes of homicide. First of her sister, brother-in-law, and mother to the brother-in-law. Later of her niece, nephew, and the niece's 2 sons. On each occasion, she showed steely resolve, never flinched, immediately took over as she had to do 60 years earlier, and commenced to order the family together, gather people for funerals. And during those intervening 60 years, of course, and the film you're about to see, short excerpt, interview with Dr. Friday, you will see about her career as an attorney and justice. And she'll talk about some of the things that happened to her, some of the humorous things. One of the most humorous to me that she used to refer to frequently was her first jury trial in 1929 in the courtroom in Wentworth. In those days, women could not serve on the jury. In those days, there were no females in the clerk's office, nor in the sheriff's office. And so, when it came time to argue her case to the jury, there was no female in the courtroom except Judge Sharp. Her opponent was Mr. Allen D. Ivey, Jr., who was the district attorney many years later in the old 17th Judicial District. He was a contemporary of hers. They graduated from law school together. And as he commenced his argument to the jury, he said, gentlemen of the jury, the presence of sweet womanhood in this courtroom today rarefies the atmosphere. She loved to tell that story. Her presence and that of the 6 living honorees have rarefied this court's work since 1962, and more importantly, have rarefied the history of this state and the progress of this state since then. Now it's my great pleasure to let you see, thanks to modern technology, of which I am limited in my knowledge, a video interview with Dr. Friday, excerpts from it.
How did you get interested in the law?
Well, it all came about because my father was a lawyer. He was a very busy man, and we rarely saw him except at meals. And he would entertain us with stories of his latest exploits in court. And I just thought to be a lawyer would be wonderful.
Well, did you choose to come to University at Chapel Hill Law School? Is that where you did your legal training?
Yes. When I entered the law school, the requirements were nothing like as strict as they are now. Only had to have 2 years of college work. So I just came over from Women's College in Greensboro, entered the law school. I was one girl in a class of 60 boys. That was the first year class. I suppose the law school had less than 100 at that time. I'm sure it did. Now I understand they are 1/3 of the population of the law school are women.
What was the transition like from trial judge to appellate judge? You find it difficult?
I came in at a time when we had no court of appeals, and the workload was simply terrific. In fact, Judge Denny admitted he heard I was a party to call me to come on down to Raleigh and get to reading records, because if I got behind, I'd never get caught up. And I don't think I ever got caught up the years I was on the court.
Well, now you've identified one of the problems right off. That is the enormous volume of work that has to be done. Now, historically, that led to the establishment of the Court of Appeals.
That's right.
Now, has that mechanism proven to be adequate in the sense of helping the Supreme Court burden be lightened?
Oh, yes, it has lightened the work of the Supreme Court, because had we not had some relief, we simply wouldn't have been able to have given everybody one appeal, which has been the policy of this state. Now, how long that can be continued, I don't know, because the Court of Appeals has a great volume of work, too. But one of the funniest things happened. I was holding court up in Asheville, I believe, and there was an old lady on the witness stand, and her case wasn't going to suit her. All of her lawyer's objections, I was overruling. So finally she turned around to me and she says, "Honey, I don't think you understand my case very well."
Well, I know you've got a dozen of them that you could. I hope someday you'll write these things down and preserve them as interesting experiences, because after all, you were quite a pioneer in doing what you did.
Well, you know, it always puzzled me as why people thought there was any question about what to call a woman judge. But they would invariably inquire, how should you be addressed? And I said, just call me anything except that woman. But I didn't particularly like to be called Miss Judge, because I didn't do that any more often than I could help. And sometimes they would say Madam Judge with the French accent. That was good.
What about the law as a career option for women today? As you look back and look forward, what would your answer be?
Well, I think the law offers splendid opportunities for women. Just look at the third of the law school being women. They're not there because they don't think they'll be able to get a job. The big law firms are wanting women, and there's opportunity for them in the offices of the district attorneys, and they're doing all kinds of legal chores.
Now, related to that question, Judge, there's another one I want to ask you, and you're a great example of this. The emergence of women in the last period of years in public life and public career choices, but also elected officials, getting involved in general assemblies, these kinds of things. Do you see that continuing now? And being a lawyer, of course, arms a woman to invade that, if that's the way to put it, with a great deal of confidence.
Well, yes, I think there will be more and more women in the legislature and in the professions, too. I don't see any slowdown in it.
Well, I wanted to...
Because there are all kinds of problems in it now. A woman can't be a successful career woman, mother, femme fatale, and all that without some compromises.
You've been involved so much in the life of North Carolina. What do you see for the state in the next 10 years as you look down the future? You see North Carolina maintaining its leadership in the way it has in the past?
Well, I see no reason to think that the momentum will cease. I think the old North State will prevail.
It's been a real pleasure to sit here and talk with you about what it's been like to be, what you have done in the political and public life of North Carolina. And for all viewers, Judge Sharp, I want to thank you for coming on North Carolina People and sharing these wonderful experiences so generously.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me. It was a real honor and a privilege to have been on your program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Freeman, for that grand tribute to Chief Justice Susie Sharp, a woman of pioneer who opened a path for many other women over the years. Thank you, sir. Our next honoree is Chief Justice Rhoda Billings. She was the second woman to serve as Chief Justice in North Carolina. Chief Justice Billings was appointed to head the court in 1986, following her service as an Associate Justice. Chief Justice Billings will be introduced today by her daughter, Renee Crawford.
Good morning, and thank you. Welcome to everyone for coming out in this celebration. It's my mother. The year was 1951, and Rhoda Bryant, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest about something about this. My mother wrote a lot of this. So you'll see what she wrote, what I wrote, but anyway. The year was 1951, and Rhoda Bryant was registering for classes at Wilkesboro High School as a freshman. She was told that all freshman girls were required to take home economics. Rhoda thought home ec was a waste of her educational opportunity. She took her case to the principal, saying that she had two aunts who taught home ec and a mother who could teach her all she needed to know about cooking and sewing, running a household, and that she wanted to spend her credit hours on other subjects. The principal's response: that's fine. So Rhoda was the only girl in Wilkes Central graduating class of 1955 who didn't take home ec, and she was the only girl in the physics class. While she may not have realized it at the time, the experience taught her a valuable lesson. Sometimes what appear to be rules are simply expectations or traditions that may be challenged as inapplicable to some persons or in some situations. And if confronted, reasonable authority may recognize the difference. The possibility of becoming a lawyer first occurred to Rhoda in high school. Her father was a lawyer, and Susie Sharp had shown that a woman could succeed not only as a lawyer but as a judge. However, that idea faded over time until she graduated a semester early from college and spent the spring of 1959 in D.C. working as an accounting clerk in the D.C. District Court as she pondered what graduate program to enter into in the fall. There she renewed a friendship with Navy Lieutenant J.G. Don Billings, also from Wilkes County, but stationed in D.C. pending his discharge in the fall from the Navy. She did not know at the time that Judge Sharpe, not yet Justice Sharp, had expressed the opinion that a woman could not be both a lawyer and a wife and a mother. Perhaps that was because the prevailing expectation of society at the time was that a woman's place was in the home. But that was not Don's attitude, my father, sitting right back there. Unusual for a man in the 1950s, he knew he wanted a wife who wanted a career. He and Rhoda decided in the summer of 1959 to marry and both go to law school. Accomplished economically by their taking turns. Don went first because he was older. In the meantime, Rhoda worked at Duke Hospital and gave birth to me and to my brother, Doug, 2 years later. As it turned out, the expectation that law school and legal careers were for men only was proven to have little support in law schools. She not only was accepted at all law schools to which she applied, but was given a full scholarship to Wake Forest Law School. When Mom entered law school, I was 3 years old. That's a long time ago. And my brother, Doug, was 9 months. She treated law school as her day job, almost never studying in the evenings. Nonetheless, she graduated #1 as the only woman in her class. However, she was not by any means the first woman to graduate from Wake Forest Law School. Looking back and reflecting on her career, Mom realized that she owes a significant portion of her success to timing. She entered the profession at a time when society's expectations of women in the workforce was beginning to change. And being a woman increased her visibility, which in turn increased opportunity. She also acknowledges the critical importance of her family's support. Although she and Dad had intended to practice law together when, after 2 years in practice, the opportunity arose for her to run for one of the 5 newly created district court judgeships in Forsyth County, Dad encouraged her to run, and she won. While the primary seat of the district court was in Winston-Salem, court was held once a week in Kernersville, just a few miles down the road. One day, when my brother, Doug, was 6 years old, his school was closed. She's a judge, but she's a mom also, and so Mom took him to Kernersville with her to the court. He sat in the front row with the bailiff while she went into chambers and changed into her big black robe. The usual parade of misdemeanors passed before her, and she sentenced one of them to a short stint in jail. My brother, Doug, looked at the bailiff and said, "That's not my mom." And I know what he meant, because while my mother was a judge and my mother was many things in public eye, law professor, justice on the Supreme Court, Chief Justice on the Supreme Court, chairman, first woman chairman of the Parole Commission, first woman chairman of the North Carolina Bar Association, president of North Carolina Bar, what I knew her as was Mom. And coming home, picking us up from wherever we were in the evenings and standing at the stove in her high heels and her suit, making dinner for us and reading us every night stories, giving us our baths and reading us the stories to get us in bed, and being there at my volleyball games and my basketball games and my brother's tennis matches, and ironing my dad's shirts, and in the laundry room night after night ironing his shirts, and growing her garden. She always planted a garden, playing tennis, and being there for hours on end with my father's mother, calling and listening to her talk. She loved to talk, and my mother would just listen for hours to her mother-in-law. So she was a wife and she was a mother, and she was proving Susie Sharp wrong. So when she also accepted positions on many, many, many boards and commissions, including being the first woman president of the North Carolina Bar Association, and then occasionally took her away from home, Dad took care of me and Doug in her absence. After we were grown and gone from home, he traveled with her, and he still does because she still serves, spending enough time in hotel rooms as she attended meetings, particularly at the National Uniform Laws Commission, to write a novel. He wrote a whole entire novel. Dad was politically active also, both in the campaigns of Jim Holshouser and Jim Martin for governor, and he used his political capital on Mom's behalf. When Governor Martin's appointment secretary asked if Mom would accept an appointment to the Parole Commission, Dad's response was that if she did, it would be on the condition that if a vacancy appeared on the Supreme Court, her being on the Parole Commission would not prevent her from being considered to fill that vacancy. Only weeks after her appointment as chair of the Parole Commission, Chief Justice Earl Vaughn announced his retirement due to illness, and Governor Martin appointed her as the next Associate Justice. Shortly thereafter, Chief Justice Branch announced his retirement, just over 2 months before the 1986 election. The tradition for many years had been that when a Chief Justice retires before the end of his term, the governor appoints the senior Associate Justice as chief. Governor Martin said that the true tradition was that the governor appointed the senior associate of his political party as chief. And since Mom was the senior and only Republican Associate Justice, he appointed her to replace Justice Branch with the understanding that she would run in the upcoming election for the seat in the fall. Sometimes some traditions cannot be successfully challenged. And in that case, Justice Exum's victory on the election showed that that can just be the case. So Mom's tenure on the Supreme Court came to an end in 1986. It was disappointing for, I remember that when the election results, because she was so well suited for that role on the Supreme Court. But being my mom, she picked herself up. She went back to teaching at law school for many more years at Wake Forest, where she actually left her greatest legacy of the law by educating hundreds of North Carolina's best and brightest attorneys across the state. I practiced law for many years, and sometimes I would meet people who had had my mother as a law professor, and you can see them take a step back. And they would say, she scared me, but she taught me more than any other law professor that I had, and I owe so much of my career, men and women, to her. And that's where she left, I think, her greatest legacy. And throughout those years, still tending to her garden, taking care of her family, and paving the way for women and men who were inspired by her courage and independent thinking. Congratulations, Mom. I love you.
Thank you, Renee, for that very proud tribute to your mother. Our next honoree served first as an Associate Justice and then also served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Chief Justice Sarah Parker was appointed Chief Justice in 2006 and later that year won election to a full term. She served as Chief Justice until her retirement from the bench in 2014. Chief Justice Parker will be introduced today by Catherine Arrowwood.
Good morning. First, I would just like, as a point of personal privilege, to thank all these women sitting here, including Chief Justice Sharp. They have been a role model for me, an inspiration, and our current sitting justices are role models and inspirations for every young woman lawyer out there today, and we really owe you all a debt of gratitude. Each one of you has been a pioneer paving the way for us. And I also want to thank Chief Justice Parker for inviting me to introduce her. It is a great privilege to do this. In 1969, Sarah Elizabeth Parker graduated from UNC Law School and by some miracle got an interview with Tom Lockhart, who was a lawyer in Charlotte in a very prominent firm. I say miracle because it was 1969. Now, you heard Chief Justice Sharp say that she was 1 out of 60 when she went to law school decades before. When Chief Justice Parker went to law school, her graduating class had only 6 women out of 150. So not much progress had been made. So it was a miracle that she was able to get an interview. But Lockhart was asked about that interview some years later, and he said he had never really considered even interviewing a woman, much less hiring one. But as a matter of courtesy, he decided he'd take the interview and chat with her. But he asked her about her perspective on life, and he was tremendously impressed because she quoted Shakespeare. In fact, she quoted Polonius's lines from Hamlet: "To thine own sense be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. He said he was suitably impressed and offered her a job. So she went to work in a private law firm, and not based on family connections or anything else. I mean, it was very unusual at the time. Sarah Parker has never shirked from challenge. Many of you may not know that prior to going to law school and after graduating from college, she entered the Peace Corps and spent 2 years in Turkey as a volunteer. This was between 1964 and 1969. And just think about going off on that adventure in 1964 to Turkey as a young American girl volunteering in the Peace Corps. I mean, that takes some guts. I promise you, I don't think I could have done that. Additionally, in 1985, after 16 years with the Lockhart firm, where she had been quite successful, she accepted appointment to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. Now, keep in mind, that meant she was going to have to run for statewide office. No problem. Not only did Chief Justice Parker run and win in the next election, she was elected and reelected to judicial office over the next 30 years, winning every time, and ultimately becoming the Chief Justice, as you have heard, in February of 2006. Her term as Chief Justice was similarly filled with challenge. During that period of time, a decision was made to renovate this fine building. So she had to find a place for the court to meet for 2 years while the building was being renovated, and had the task, of course with no engineering or architectural background, of overseeing its renovation. It was all quite successful, and there was a huge celebration following the reopening of the courthouse. The list of her awards and resolutions to her and the tributes to her is very, very long, and I'm not going to go into them. But I reviewed a lot of them in preparation for making these remarks. And the thing that truly struck me was the consistency over time of how she was characterized. And I want to cite one example. In 1985, the rector of Charlotte's Christ Church was interviewed. That is her church, where she has attended for many years. And he cited her deep compassion, her sharp intellect, her integrity and humility, all characteristics necessary for a good judicial temperament. Now, Chief Justice Parker has pointed out to me that he made those remarks after it had been announced that she was being appointed to the court. And everyone is real nice to you after they find out you're going to be on the court. But I have good reason to believe that the rector knew her well, because those same remarks have been made about her over and over again over the decades. But she has another important characteristic that the rector did not mention, and that is a desire to reach out beyond the court, not to be stuck in the ivory tower, so to speak, and to understand what is going on across our state. For example, Chief Justice Parker has always reached out to support women in the legal profession, and for that I am personally grateful, as are many women in this state. Recognizing this work, the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys has established a scholarship in her name. To date, over 10 young women law students have benefited from the scholarship since it was established. And throughout Chief Justice Parker's time on the bench, she has regularly driven across the state to attend the most minute of local bar events and public happenings, and stayed in touch with the people of North Carolina, both to support local bars, both as part of campaigns, and to promote the cause of justice outside the state capitol. Not everyone does this. And I know she has done this because for over 30 years, she has been a loyal and regular attendee at the annual Buck Harris Dinner held in my home county of Robeson County every year. Now, if you don't know what it is, let me just take a minute to explain it, to put this in context. Franklin Freeman, you know what I'm talking about. I was disappointed you didn't render Amazing Grace today, which he has sung at the Buck Harris Dinner more than once. This is a dinner that was established in the last century in honor of Judge Buck Harris from Raleigh, who used to go down and hold the Christmas court in Robeson County. It is an annual event for judges, lawyers, and law enforcement in the several county area, and it's a bit of a free-for-all. It's a time when the lawyers and jurists come together, and including Chief Justice Parker, can show their sense of humor and just have basically a good time right before Christmas. Many hilarious stories swirl around this dinner. Some are true, some are imagined, and some are not quite suitable for me to discuss in our setting today. The point about all this is, though, that Chief Justice Parker regularly attends the Buck Harris dinner. She still comes, even after her retirement. And not every judge is comfortable coming there because you can be subjected to rather pointed comments on your judicial temperament and conduct in the courtroom. And that's the whole point of the dinner to begin with. But she comes every year, and she has addressed the crowd at the Buck Harris dinner on more than one occasion, showing a great sense of humor about the whole event. At one dinner she said, and this was something that I think everyone there truly appreciated, "Tradition is what gives this dinner and celebration its beauty, fabric, and richness. It gives us a chance to laugh at ourselves and to recognize the humor in our otherwise serious work." Chief Justice Parker, you have honored us all with your integrity and intelligence, and above all, by respecting and maintaining traditions such as the Buck Harris dinner, and always showing us a sense of humor as you did it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine, for that outstanding tribute to Chief Justice Parker. Our next honoree was the first African-American woman to serve on the Supreme Court. Justice Patricia Timmons-Goodson joined the court in 2006 as an Associate Justice and served in that capacity for 7 years. Introducing Justice Timmons-Goodson today is Jenny Lyston.
Good morning. What an honor it is for me to be here. But I have to say, as Justice Freeman pointed out, it is really odd to be standing with my back to this bench as an appellate practitioner, but I'm going to try to get over it and talk to everyone here. My name is Jenny Lyston. I'm with the Office of the Federal Public Defender here in the Eastern District of North Carolina, and I had the distinct privilege of serving as a law clerk to Justice Timmons-Goodson, both at the North Carolina Court of Appeals and here at this court, the Supreme Court of North Carolina. And I was driving into work this morning. I heard a report on the news. It's very interesting. Today is actually Equal Pay Day for women in the state. And it is a symbolic day to represent the amount of time that it takes for women to earn the same amount of money as men. And so I thought it was very befitting that we're having this ceremony today honoring these amazing women, but I hope that we all recognize that there's still some work to be done. North Carolina women earn 82 cents for every dollar that men do, and for women of color there is even more of a wage gap. So as wonderful as this is, I do hope we recognize that we're still working on things. Any introduction of Justice Timmons-Goodson, I think, has to begin with her parents and her family. Because if you have ever heard any speech she has given or any interview that she has ever done, that is where she begins herself, always with her wonderful parents. She is the daughter of Sergeant First Class Edward Timmons and his wife, Beulah Timmons. And while I never had the privilege of meeting Sergeant Timmons, I have had the privilege of knowing her mother, Beulah, and she is an amazing person in and of herself. Her parents strive to imbue all of their 6 children, of whom Justice Timmons-Goodson is the oldest, with a deep moral integrity, a deep sense of values and character, an unswerving devotion to faith and to our Lord, and to a general sense of justice, and in particularly incredibly strong belief in the value of education. And so valuing that sense of education, it's no surprise that Justice Timmons-Goodson went on to become a triple Tar Heel. She has a BA from Carolina along with a JD, along with an honorary doctorate. And apparently she was unsatisfied with those degrees, because in 2014 she went on to receive her LLM from the Duke University School of Law, earning a Master's of Law degree in Judicial Studies. She began her law career in Cumberland County as an assistant district attorney, and she also worked as a legal aid attorney. And she must have been pretty darn good, because it was not long before Governor Jim Hunt asked her to serve as a district court judge in Cumberland County. And I think she was the ripe old age of 29 at the time. And it must have been a pretty unusual sight to have an African-American female judge on the bench, because I remember her telling me about when she first came to start work as a judge, and she went into the parking lot and she went to the reserved parking for judges. She got into a very heated argument with the parking attendant, who told her, no, 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 ma'am, this spot is reserved for judges only. And she had to tell him over and over again, I am actually the judge. I am here, trust me. So she must have convinced him, and she must have done an awfully good job, because for the next 12 years, the voters of Cumberland County re-elected her to that position in Cumberland County. She was the first African-American female judge in Cumberland County to serve in that role. Obviously, she did well, because Jim Hunt then, in 1997, appointed her to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. And when she was reelected to that spot, she became the first African-American woman to be elected to any state appellate court. She stepped down in 2005, thinking that her judicial career was at an end, but it turns out that it was only just beginning, because only a few months after she stepped down, she got a call from then Governor Mike Easley, who was telling her that there was a spot opening up on the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and in fact, it was the spot being vacated by Associate Justice Sarah Parker was becoming Chief Justice Sarah Parker, and so she was appointed to this seat, which I think is very fitting that Justice Timmons-Goodson would be taking a spot being vacated by another, as you've already heard, amazing woman, an amazing jurist. Again, she is the first African-American woman to serve on North Carolina's highest court. And not only that, but at her investiture, Chief Justice Parker then pointed out that there were now, for the first time, 2 women justices serving on this court at the same time. I'm very happy to recognize, as you all know, that we now have 3 women justices on the court, and we have 6 women judges, very ably led by Chief Judge Linda McGee, next door at the Court of Appeals. So again, we are making progress, but there's still some room for improvement, I would say. In November 2012, she notified everyone that she was going to be resigning her seat at this court, thereby opening up a seat for the very wonderful Cheri Beasley, who took her spot. So I really think it's wonderful that you have this continuity of women in these different wonderful seats and wonderful women jurists. In 2014, President Barack Obama appointed her to the United States Commission for Civil Rights, where she has served since 2015 as the vice chair of that commission. In 2016, President Obama nominated her to the federal bench, to an open seat on the district court for the Eastern District of North Carolina. And while ultimately that nomination did not come to fruition, politics being what they are, I know that that is still a very great honor for her. And certainly for those of us who practice in the Eastern District, it is a great loss to us. For all of her tireless dedication to public service, to the people of this state, she has received so many accolades, I can't even list them all. But of note, she has been inducted into the North Carolina Women's Hall of Fame in 2010. She has been awarded the Order of the Longleaf Pine. UNC Chapel Hill has given her numerous awards, including the Honorary Doctorate and the UNC Distinguished Alumni Award. Elon University has recognized her, and she has honorary degrees from Johnson C. Smith University and from St. Augustine's College. And finally, I just have to note what Justice Timmons-Goodson has meant to me personally. Working for her, and I'm sure for anyone who has worked for her, knows that she serves as an incredible example of dedication to the rule of law and to intellectual honesty. I can tell you, she did not always personally like the outcomes of her decisions, but if that is what the law required, then that was what the law required, and she was very dedicated to making sure that everyone in this state got equal justice. Her personal striving for excellence served as a wonderful example for anyone who worked with her. And also this idea of giving it back, paying it forward. She works tirelessly to mentor hundreds of young women in this state, particularly young women of color. And there are countless numbers of women who owe her so much for her personal guidance, including myself. And particularly for me, she served as a wonderful example as a working mother. No matter how much work she had, and there was always a lot of work, she was always there for her two boys. You know, whether it was finding the right school for Sonny, taking Aaron to tennis practice, or helping him get ready for the spelling bee, she was always there. And the investment that she placed in her children, I think, can be seen by the incredible men that they have become. And for myself, it meant a lot to me to see, as a mom of four myself, to see this woman working, giving so much to the state, and able to also maintain her role as a mother. And so, yes, I agree, Suzie Sharp was incorrect. You can be a wonderful jurist and have a wonderful family life as well. So, quite frankly, she's just always served as my ideal. In preparing for this, I was reading a lot of interviews with her, and there was an interview in 2008 where the journalist described her very aptly, I think. She said that she was sincere, genuinely confident, and exudes mountains of wisdom without the ego. And I think 10 years later that those words are even truer today than they were. So I'm incredibly honored, and I want to thank you, Justice Timmons-Goodson, for all that you have done for me and for this state. And it is my incredible honor to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, for that warm and caring tribute to Justice Timmons-Goodson. Justice Robyn Hudson, our next honoree, currently serves as an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court. She's been a member of the court since 2007 and is currently the longest-serving woman justice. Justice Hudson will be introduced today by Janet Ward Black. She had her first appellate case before the North Carolina Supreme Court, Taylor versus J.P. Stevens, in 1980, when she was 28 years old. It's not normal for a 20-something-year-old lawyer to make her way in front of the august body that is the North Carolina Supreme Court
but Robyn Hudson has never been normal. After graduating from Page High School in Greensboro, Robyn made her way to Yale University for college, where she graduated in 1973 with a degree in psychology and philosophy, both skills that would come in handy for the rest of her career to date. But unlike most students at Yale, she worked as a waitress for the 4 years of her matriculation there. She returned to North Carolina and attended the School of Law at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Then she went into private practice representing people who were injured at work and other types of civil litigation. Thereafter, she served as an assistant appellate defender before returning again to civil and criminal practice. In private practice, Robyn Hudson was not just willing to settle cases, but to try them. And not just to try them, but to appeal them, or be on the receiving end of an appeal to the bitter end. Prior to joining the Court of Appeals in 2001, Robyn had represented over 130 parties in our state's appellate courts as a practitioner, yielding published opinions, creating records on appeal, writing briefs, arguing before the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. Her courage was not restricted to litigating. After about 20 or so years of practice, she ran for statewide office in her first ever political endeavor and won a seat on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. She served there until she ran for the North Carolina Supreme Court and began her first term in 2007. She was reelected again in 2014, but it didn't come without a nationally recognized fight. Television advertisements appeared 10 days before the primary stating that Justice Hudson, and I quote, sided with the predators, and I quote again, was not tough on child molesters and not fair to victims. Those attack ads made the news from New York to LA, but in spite of that assault, Justice Hudson was reelected in 2014 and stands before you now having served over 17 years on North Carolina's two highest courts. In addition to her day jobs in private practice and as an appellate defender and as a member of the judiciary, she has continued to fight for the rule of law and the health and vibrancy of the legal profession. When she was in her 20s, she also served on the steering committee that created the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys. She is a member to this day and won their Gwyneth Davis Award for Public Service in 2008. She has served on numerous North Carolina Bar Association committees and served as vice president of that organization. She served on the National Association of Women Judges and has served as co-chair of the Judicial Independence Committee since 2015. She was named an outstanding appellate judge by the North Carolina Academy of Trial Lawyers and a Woman of Achievement by the General Federation of Women's Clubs. Just last year, she received the R.O. Everett Award for Legal Excellence at Campbell Law School for Delta Theta Phi Legal Fraternity. And just last week, she received the J. McNeil Smith Award by the Constitutional Rights and Responsibilities section of the North Carolina Bar Association. It was said there that she embodies the principles that no person is above the law's commands and no person is beneath its protection. Now, even though the North Carolina highest court has only had 7 female justices in 199 years, Robyn Hudson, irrespective of gender, has been exquisitely qualified as a justice of the Supreme Court. She's been recognized for her intellect, for her integrity, her civility, her courage, her work ethic, and a legal career that has included 20 years of representing litigants in the appellate courts and 17 years as a member of North Carolina's appellate judiciary. I love this quote about appellate judges. Justice John Onion of the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals once said this: "Appellate judges watch from on high the legal battle fought below, and when the dust and smoke of the battle clears, they come down out of the hills and shoot the wounded. For those litigators who are at times the ones being shot, to have a justice like Robyn Hudson doing the shooting is a comfort. She is full of understanding of the Constitution, the rule of law, the importance of a fair and impartial judiciary, and that justice is for all, regardless of one's place in society. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce to you Robyn Hudson.
Well, thank you, I think, Janet Ward, for that great tribute, particularly for Justice Hudson. Thank you. Justice Barbara Jackson, our next honoree, also currently serves as an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court. When Justice Jackson joined the court in 2011, for the first time in the court's history, as you've heard, the makeup of the court was 4 women and 3 men justices. Introducing Justice Jackson today is Judge Donna Stroud.
Good morning. I'm very honored to be here to speak on behalf of Barbara Jackson, whom I've had the honor of campaigning with and working with and just being a friend of for many years. And I got to know Barbara, I guess, best when we were campaigning together in 2004. Now, any of you who have campaigned know that when you're campaigning, you tend to see the other people you're campaigning with more often than you see your own family. And so you tend to really get to know those people and go through that sort of trauma experience together when you're campaigning. And so I was really impressed with her then in 2004 as we were running together. And I learned that we have some things in common. And one thing is we're both only children. And, you know, we've heard the jokes about only children being spoiled and lonely and all that. But actually, there's research on that. And it shows that only children tend to be independent, confident, to have high academic achievement, to be highly organized, and to be leaders. And I think you can see that Barbara Jackson does have, in fact, all of those good only children qualities that make her very well suited to be a judge and a justice on the Supreme Court. Now, when we were campaigning, Barbara and I also had another thing in common. We had our family supports for our campaigns, and especially our very enthusiastic fathers. Our mothers supported us too, obviously, but they were a little more quiet about their support. Our fathers were not quiet. They both had fancy sports cars, and they both drove all over the place, working very hard for us as our most enthusiastic supporters. So when I got to know Barbara in 2004, I was very impressed with her then. I saw her hard work in that campaign. She didn't have a lot of money to spend on her campaign, but she had her determination, her personality, and her qualifications. Her legal experience had prepared her well. Upon graduation from UNC Law School in 1990, she clerked right here at the Supreme Court for Chief Justice Burley Mitchell. After that, she had broad experience in the law, working with Governor Martin. Later, she worked in private practice and then as general counsel for the North Carolina Commissioner of Labor. So she then joined the Court of Appeals after that successful campaign in 2004. And at the Court of Appeals, we especially valued her expertise in administrative and employment law. Now, in 2007, of course, when she came to the Court of Appeals, I got to see more of her. She really became a friend and one of my mentors on the court and really helped me learn how to do the job as an appellate judge. When she was elected to come to the Supreme Court in 2010, she left me and came over here across the street to the Supreme Court. It was certainly a loss to me and to the Court of Appeals, but certainly a gain for the Supreme Court. I do miss having her down the hall, though. Now, Barbara's election to the Supreme Court was notable for two firsts, and you've already heard about one that Judge McGee mentioned, which is most important at this event where we're honoring our female justices. When she came to the Supreme Court for the first time in history, the court had a female majority. There was another first that might be especially important to any UNC fans here. I think we probably have a few. But at that point, all 7 justices on the court were UNC law school graduates. That was a fact I did not know until I was getting ready for this. Now, Barbara has always been devoted to the law and to improving her skills. So in 2012, when Duke Law School began its Master of Judicial Studies LLM program, despite her love of UNC, she agreed to go to Duke and be in its charter class. And I was there too, and Justice Timmons-Goodson, as you've already heard, were there at Duke for that LLM program, which is a great experience for all of us. Now, I have some inside knowledge because I was Barbara's roommate during that time. We stayed over in Durham for most of the time during the 2 summer sessions of that program. And I can tell you that she's also a great roommate. And, I can tell you about what she's doing on her time off, too, in the summer. Now, some people think, or some people say, that the Supreme Court justices aren't doing a lot of work during the summer. I can tell you that that is not true. She had boxes and boxes of reading to do from the Supreme Court all summer. Was working on that, of course, along with her work from Duke and working on her thesis. And, of course, she got it all done with her usual excellence. Barbara's thesis in the LLM program is something I would recommend to you. It was a real contribution to scholarship about our state and our Supreme Court. She did a biographical thesis about Justice William Gaston, who served on this court from 1833 until 1844. I think he's the 6th one listed on your list of justices there. Her thesis required original research, going through his personal papers in New Bern. And I now use her thesis as part of my judicial biography reading in my judicial process class at Campbell, which is very nice to have some biography of a North Carolina justice. It's easy to find things about United States Supreme Court justices, but difficult to find that about North Carolina justices. So a very real contribution to our scholarship. I don't have enough time to say, much about all of her other contributions to our courts and our state. Such as being a co-chair recently of the North Carolina Commission on the Administration of Law and Justice, or her work with the North Carolina Bar Association, or the Courts Commission, and many other things that she's done. But you can see what she's doing if you follow her on Twitter or Instagram. Barbara is probably our most technologically advanced judge and certainly most up-to-date on popular culture. In fact, she was, once a Jeopardy contestant. And so you can see what she's doing right there. She's working hard, though, to advance technology in our courts as well, and she's had a huge role in that, and a large part in our new updated website for the Administrative Office of the Courts, which is going to be coming out in June. So I am very happy to have her over here at the Supreme Court and continuing to learn from her still, and I hope to do so for many years. And I'm very blessed to call her a mentor and a friend.
Thank you, Judge Stroud, for that great tribute to Justice Jackson. Justice Cheri Beasley is also currently serving as an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court. Justice Beasley joined the court in 2012. She will be introduced today by Dina Griffin.
Good morning. I have this really big urge to say, may it please the court, but I'll refrain. It is an honor and a privilege to stand before you today and to return to my court family. I served as Justice Beasley's executive assistant and research assistant for almost 2 years here at the Supreme Court, and I followed her kind of all through my law school career, through her little campaign, and I've kind of just been hanging on to her little coattails for the last probably 3 or 4 years or more. So she is very near and dear to my heart. I want to say thank you to the Chief Justice, to the Associate Justices who are here today, to our honorees, to Chief Judge McGee, and to the Associate Judges and all of our dignitaries in the room. Thank you for being here. I am so excited about today. This is an amazing opportunity to recognize the women who contribute to our judiciary. It's such a special day to celebrate our women justices in particular in our state of North Carolina. I have the honor of recognizing my justice, and I say my justice. I know she belongs to all of us, but I say my justice because she's my advisor, mentor, and my dear friend. But I have the pleasure of introducing her and talking about her today. I'm going to share a few things. I think everyone's kind of familiar with her biography, but there are things that she taught me that aren't in her biography, and I do want to point those things out. I want to say a couple of things about state court judges in general. When I was thinking about coming before you today, I looked up kind of where we stand. Similar to Jenny, when she talked about kind of what improvements we have going forward. We're doing good on the Supreme Court. We're almost at a majority, you know. But in 2016, only about 30% of our state court judges were women. And so, as you can imagine, even, well, a lot fewer were women of color. And so in looking at those, it's kind of imperative to talk about both celebrate that we have these women on the Supreme Court, on our Court of Appeals, and in our judiciary, but also talk about the importance of kind of pushing forward and how do we continue to do that and keep that going. It is imperative for, you know, generally speaking, women in our state's judiciary to be intelligent. We need them to be independent thinkers, driven, disciplined, fortuitous. What I found special about my Justice Cheri Beasley, during my time with her, is that she's a courageous trailblazer. She's willing to put in the work to ensure that the court was adhering to the case law as closely as possible, while also considering the challenges and dynamics that were unique to our state of North Carolina. So when I think about kind of what kind of rings true, so one example, when I'll use a judicial example and then I'll go to other examples. I think about N. Ray JDB. Justice Beasley was the first African-American woman elected to a statewide office without the benefit of an appointment by our governor. So she was elected in 2008 and started her term in 2009, of course, after her investiture. N. Ray JDB was published in 2009 with Justice Beasley's dissent. So imagine being elected in 2008 during what most would say would be a groundbreaking election year, which let's just go out on a limb and say that. Imagine that you're becoming acclimated to your new role because you're now in statewide office. Even though you've been a jurist for about 10 years prior, you're now in a statewide office reviewing on the appellate level the opinions of what are now your contemporaries. Now you're reviewing their opinions. You are what I would call divinely placed on a panel of 3 judges, because the cases are heard in panels of 3, for a case that you receive that you probably hang your head because you're like, I read this case, I read the record, I read the briefs, I read the case law, I go home and I ponder it, and I have to dissent in this case. It is my first year. I cannot dissent in this case. And you have to dissent. You say, based upon my reading of the case law, based upon my consideration of the unique challenges that we have in North Carolina, I have to dissent in this case. I'm new. I just got here. I have to do it. it is imperative that I dissent in this case. This case is evidence, In re JDB, this is 2009, this is evidence to me of her bravery, because it is very easy to agree. It's hard to stand out as the newbie in the room. And so it is evidence of her bravery, of her willingness to step forward even when you just don't want to. And what's really cool is that the Supreme Court agreed. So how cool is that? You're in your first year, and you get to puff out your chest a little bit. So that's one example. So I come into the Supreme Court as her research assistant and executive assistant. And I want to talk about two things that kind of ring true as I sat there and I watched her work. Because I got to see, similar to the other honored guest, I had the opportunity to watch her work in excellence as a jurist, but also as a friend, as a spouse and partner, as a mother, as a community member, and as a church member. She has mentored countless women across the state, women and men. I can't even just say women and men, but I'll talk to the women. She's a mother to 2 sons, and I want to say little pumpkins, but they're not little pumpkins, they're grown men. They're so big now. She told me a story, which I'm going to share with you today. She told me a story of when she ran for office in the district court, for the district court bench in Cumberland County. She had toddlers at the time, they're twins, and her opponent at the time made a remark that she would not have time to adequately do the job because she had toddlers and that she was a mother. And I am hearing this now 15 years after the fact with a toddler, and I was furious. And she had a different reaction. I'm furious as Dina. Justice Beasley took it in grace, and she ran a campaign and won, and she did the job, and she did it in excellence. And what I got from that, when she told me that story, was that I can do that too. And I tell that story to other women who are either considering having children, considering having a dog, considering having getting a partner or a spouse, and I tell them that story because you can do it. And there are examples of people who are doing it and doing it successfully. They're using their brain to make great big decisions, interpret case law, analyze facts, and then going home and cooking dinner and making it great and plating it. So she's a family member who cares for others as well. So it's not just her caring for her sons. There are family members, as we all know, who get sick, who need our help. And she was available. She was available, ready, and willing, and she still got the job done. We heard Susie Sharp talk about her boss telling her to get on down to Raleigh to get those records read. Justice Beasley took those records on the road when needed because she needed to be there for her family. And so when mentoring other women and when sharing with other women what this balance looked like, it included caring for others and being available to do so and making space to do so. When I worked with her, I saw someone who volunteers in her community. And that's volunteering as a mentor, that's volunteering to do cleanup, that's volunteering as a keynote speaker. It's volunteering in general and just entrenching herself in the community so that people know and can see what they can be. And when they can see what they can be and they can see themselves in the leader that's there, they reach for the stars. You see young people who they see Justice Beasley, and she's there and she's I mean, Suzie Sharp said we couldn't do it, but she can be fierce and smart and do the job, and they see her being all of those things, and they know that they can do that too, and that's important. I also saw someone who modeled the behaviors she would like to see for those who came after her. I called her a trailblazer for a reason. The honored guests today, they have set out a path for us to come behind them. It's not a path where the path, like the sand or the waves come back in and they cover up the path. The path is set. And I think that when we think about what Justice Beasley has done for the people who have been in her chambers, for the people who have come to her chambers for informational interviews, for those with whom she's met, for those who've heard her speak at events, I think what's most important is that she's modeling this spirit of excellence that she wants to see from the young people and the women of color who will come after her. And she's leaving this path for us. Well, we hope she never leaves, but whenever someone comes behind her, there it is. And she's shown you how to follow in her footsteps. I would only tell half the story if I only talked about her womanhood. She is a woman of color, a proud woman of color. It comes with different challenges. I recall several times groups coming, groups with, I'll talk about two groups. One group from Robeson County. Somebody talked about Robeson County. It was a group of young people who were in desperate need of mentors. They were taking a field trip up to Raleigh to talk to several groups. And so they talked to Justice Beasley here at the Supreme Court, but then they also went to the legislature and talked to other people there as well. Those groups like that, to have someone up here at the Supreme Court willing to give of their time, a person of color who's doing her job in excellence, but also giving of her time and making space for groups like that, is necessary. It's necessary, and Justice Beasley continued to do it over and over. And it's not just that group. It's been many. And I know she's going to giggle, and she's probably going to look over her shoulder at me. But I've had many conversations with her to the effect of, Justice Beasley, we are not campaigning, because that's just how full her schedule was, with groups either coming or she was going to speak with people. And this is and to be fair, some of those groups she didn't even have a connection with. These are just people who found her, and they were like, we need you. And she's like, I'm there. And she made the space and the time. I want to say also that she's intentional about making time to speak to historically African-American places of faith. That is something that's very important to her. She's had several speaking engagements and been recognized by several churches at women's events. And she takes a lot of time to encourage women, particularly women of color. And when I think about something like that, it also makes me think that, and we've had conversations about this before, but her schedule's full. Like, she's running from tennis practice with her sons to orchestra practice with the other son to home to make sure dinner's on the table to home to write speech to did I read these records to Dina's calling because Dina's having a career crisis and needs some advice to back to work to do it all over again. And then, and somewhere in that time period, she's finding time. This is intentional because the time's not automatically there. She's finding time to talk to these groups. And I admire that about her. And I think we can all glean that from her. And even if it's just one group that we reach out to a piece, as women, as professionals, we can all take that a little piece of that from this meeting here today. to reflect on the journey of this court thus far with the women who are honored here today. To my Justice Cheri Beasley, we thank you for your service. We thank you for your sacrifice of your time to the people of North Carolina, to me and all my phone calls, for being a living example of perseverance for women and women of color, for young women, for working in excellence and demanding that people around you do the same. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina, for that great tribute to Justice Beasley. Our special ceremony today is coming to an end, but before it does, we will be hearing from one of our distinguished honorees, Justice Robyn Hudson, sharing a few words with us.
Thank you, Chief Judge McGee. It's been many years since I stood at a podium in this room for the first time. My son Charles, who is here today, was only a few months old, and he now has a wife and 2 daughters of his own, which puts what we are all doing into context. I want to say thank you on behalf of all of these women justices, including Chief Justice Sharp, for taking the time to be here with us, whether in person or watching from elsewhere, and share in this celebration. And thank you to all of the dignitaries, the colleagues, the friends and family who have supported us as we have sought and served in these positions over these many years. We have all taken the oath seriously to uphold and maintain the Constitution and the laws, and we continue to do so as we must going forward for the sake of our children and our grandchildren. There are roles to play for all of us, whether as judges in service and continuing to diversify these courts, whether as educators, or whether just as citizens to become informed ourselves and participate in maintaining this great system of justice as an independent arbiter of the disputes of the parties. We all have roles to play. So please choose as many as you want and play them well. And with apologies to Justice Freeman, please go out and rarefy the atmosphere. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Hudson. We appreciate your thoughtful words of thanks. 35% of states' Supreme Court justices across the country are women, with 10 states presently having a majority of women on their highest court. Our Supreme Court has had 7 talented women serve as justices of our highest court, including 3 Chief Justices. Please rise and join me in thanking these women who have served on the Supreme Court. You may be seated. Thank you. In a moment, we'll have the benediction, and this historic ceremony will conclude. Immediately following the ceremony, there will be a reception at Campbell Law School that's located on Hillsborough Street, just a few blocks away. While at the reception, please take just a moment to view the exhibit honoring the women justices and judges, which is on permanent display there. Each of you will likely want to greet our honorees, and I know they want to greet you. Those of us in the courtroom are asked to please wait until the honorees and their families and the current justices have had an opportunity to leave the courtroom. And then you're welcome to proceed to the elevator at the direction of the research assistants, and then on to the reception. Those of you at the satellite locations have a bit of a head start on getting to the reception, but we will all get there and enjoy it. At this time, we are pleased to call upon Reverend Dr. Harshaw to pronounce our benediction. Following the benediction, the ceremony will be adjourned with our thanks to each of you for your attendance.
Will you please stand? And now, to him who is able to keep you from stumbling and to present you before his glorious presence without fault and with great joy, to the only wise God our Savior, be glory, majesty, power, and authority through Jesus Christ our Lord, before all ages, now and forevermore. Amen.
We are adjourned.